The last person you'd expect to see behind the wheel of a rusted '74 Bronco in forgotten corner of Oregon was Jason Statham. Not the movie star, not the international action icon, just Jason, widowed, grounded, and raising his 17-year-old daughter in quiet exile. No cameras, no stunt doubles, just oil under his nails and a reputation buried far from Hollywood. But reputation has a way of creeping back. It happened on a Friday. Small-town high school. Parking lot. A crowd of teens, some filming, most watching. Jason's daughter, Leah, had just refused the advances of Jake Turner, the local rich kid with a chip on his shoulder and no sense of consequence. She didn't raise her voice, just kept walking. Jake slapped her. It wasn't loud, but the silence that followed was deafening. Leah didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked him dead in the eye, calm as ever. The onlookers didn't know what to do, except film. She didn't tell a teacher. She didn't scream. She just walked to her truck, got in, and made one call to her father. "Dad, something happened." Jason didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. The silence in her voice said it all. The boy who raised his hand had no idea who she was, but he was about to find out. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had someone you love hurt, what would you have done? Because in this story, justice doesn't come with noise. It comes with resolve. And when Jason Statham knocks, he doesn't knock twice. Jason Statham had walked away from the noise 5 years ago. After losing his wife to cancer and watching the industry chip away at the man he used to be, he packed up what little mattered and drove north. He settled in Redbridge, Oregon, a town with no billboards, no red carpets, just trees, quiet roads, and people who didn't ask for autographs. He bought a small house with a view of the ridge, opened a modest garage behind it, and focused on one thing, raising Leah. She was his balance, sharp-witted, observant, never interested in fame. Her mother's calm and precision. Jason didn't shield her from the world, but he taught her to face it with control, with silence when silence was strength, and voice when voice was truth. To the townspeople, he was just Jay, the quiet Brit who fixed breaks better than anyone else and coached middle school soccer, like it was the World Cup. Some suspected who he was. Few ever confirmed it. Jason didn't correct them. He was done with that life. Jake Turner, however, didn't know or didn't care. Son of Darren Turner, councilman and owner of half the town's real estate, Jake walked like laws were made for someone else. Leah had ignored him for weeks. And that Friday, his ego couldn't take it anymore. The slap wasn't just disrespect. It was a trigger for a girl who'd been taught to breathe through fire, and for a man who'd once been paid to hunt down shadows and never miss. When Leah got home, she didn't say much, just handed Jason her phone. The video was already spreading. 100 comments, 1,000 views. The whole town would know by sundown. Jason watched it once, then got up. The past was done waiting. The town buzzed with whispers. By morning, the video had reached the sheriff's office, the mayor's inbox, and the school superintendent's private phone. Jake, suddenly aware the slap was bigger than a petty act, tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, a joke taken too far. His father, Darren, experienced in covering sins with charm, pulled every string he could. But Jason wasn't playing politics. He wasn't looking for favors. He was looking for truth. He met with Sheriff Owens that morning. The sheriff, a Vietnam vet with eyes like stone, had known Jason from the first day he rolled into town. They didn't talk about past. They just recognized him. "You looking to press charges?" Owens asked, leaning on his desk. Jason shook his head. "Not yet." "You planning something?" Jason locked eyes. "Not planning, just watching." Jake's arrogance hadn't faded. At Miller's diner that night, he laughed it off with his buddies. "She'll disappear. Her dad's just a mechanic. They'll be gone by next week." But it wasn't just a mechanic who was watching. Back home, Jason took down a small box from the top shelf. Inside was a single drive. He plugged it in, decrypted the old files, names, footage, personal archives, things the public never knew about the man behind the movies. The real Jason. The one governments had consulted before he ever held a script. He wasn't looking for violence, but he was preparing for resistance. Leah, watching her father from the hallway, asked softly, "What are you going to do?" Jason looked up. "I'm going to let them talk first. Then I'll make sure they listen." Because in this town, the Turners thought they owned the silence. They'd never met someone who could weaponize it. 2 days passed. The school issued a bland statement. Conduct under review, with no mention of video or names. Jake Turner was still on campus, strutting the halls, shielded by his father's money and connections. Rumors swirled, but the system remained still. That's when Jason knew. They weren't going to do a thing. Leah remained steady, but Jason could see it. The flicker behind her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting. Jason met Darren Turner outside a council meeting. No cameras, no crowd, just 2 fathers. "She's blowing this out of proportion," Darren said, voice slick with condescension. "Teenagers get into scuffles. You know how it is." Jason didn't blink. "That wasn't a scuffle. That was your boy putting his hands on mine." Darren smiled, smug. "We'll let the school handle it." Jason's voice dropped an octave. "If they don't, I will." That night, Leah received an anonymous text. "You think your daddy scares us?" Attached was a photoshopped image of her, humiliating, cruel. She didn't cry. She showed it to her dad. Jason took one look and stood. They just made this public. He called a contact from his past. Someone still in the business. Not for muscle. For digital trails. IP addresses. Metadata. Within hours, Jason had a list. Not just who sent the image, but who helped spread it. He didn't go to the authorities. He went to their parents. One by one, Jason stood on doorsteps. Calm. Controlled. Informing them what their children had done. No threats. Just facts. One father tried to raise his voice. Jason stepped forward, eyes locked, voice cold as iron. "You protect your kid. I protect mine. But there's a line. Yours crossed it. Don't let him cross it again." Word spread. Redbridge was small. And now it was watching. Leah sat on the back porch that evening, watching the shadows stretch across the valley. She wasn't angry, not in the way most teens would be. Her pain ran deeper, older. She'd lost her mother young. Learned to read people the way most read books. Jake's slap wasn't shock. It was a confirmation that silence in the face of cruelty was a luxury not everyone could afford. Jason stepped out, sat beside her, handed her a mug of tea like he had every night since she was 12. They didn't speak for a while. Did Mom ever let people walk over her? Leah finally asked. Jason stared at the hills. Never, but she chose her battles. And this? Jason turned to her, his voice soft but firm. This, she'd have burned the whole town down. Leah smiled, for the first time in days. Back inside, Jason watched clips from Jake's social media, archived phone data, piecing together a timeline of behavior. He wasn't building a revenge plan. He was building a case. Because the real damage wasn't just a slap, it was the system that enabled it. The school counselor would file 3 quiet complaints about Jake, silenced by the superintendent. A female student who left after months of harassment, ignored by admin Jason, collected the stories like puzzle pieces. And when Leah offered to help, he let her. Together, they worked in silence. Not just father and daughter, but truth and fire. Because Jason had spent his life dodging bullets, jumping from helicopters, surviving chaos. But none of it compared to watching his daughter stand up day after day with calm dignity while the world tried to silence her. And he knew then this wasn't a story anymore. It was hers. But he'd be damned if she fought alone. For days later, the school board finally scheduled an emergency hearing. Public, under pressure. The video had circulated far beyond town lines now, shared by activist journalists and even one of Jason's former co-stars who tweeted in quiet support. She's her father's daughter. Leah walked into that room alone, not because Jason wasn't with her, but because she chose to. Inside, parents and faculty whispered. Jake sat beside his father, eyes down, no longer smug, just small. The board's chair tried to start with protocol, but Leah interrupted, calmly placing a binder on the table. Inside, witness statements, digital evidence, dates, messages, screenshots. The full timeline of Jake Turner's behavior and the system's failure to act. She spoke clearly without trembling. This isn't about a slap. This is about what we allow boys like Jake to do when no one holds them accountable. There was no shouting, no anger, just truth. When she finished, Jason finally stepped into the room, said nothing, just stood in the back, a presence that made even the boldest in the room think twice. The board recessed. 20 minutes later, Jake was suspended indefinitely, pending further investigation. A separate panel would review Leah's complaint, with legal observers present. It wasn't victory, but it was movement. Outside, the air felt lighter. Jason walked beside Leah in silence. She looked up at him. "You didn't have to come in," she said. "I didn't come for them," Jason replied. "I came for you." That night, for the first time in a week, Leah slept soundly. Jason stood by her door a moment longer than usual, not to protect, just to remember. The storm had passed for now, but Jason knew better than anyone. There's always one more wave, and when it came, they'd face it together. The relief didn't last long. 2 mornings later, Jason received a letter from a law firm representing Darren Turner, a formal cease and desist, accusations of defamation, public harassment, and implied threat of litigation if Leah or Jason continued speaking out. Jason read in silence, then folded it neatly and slid it into a drawer. He recognized the play. It wasn't about law. It was about intimidation. Darren Turner was used to controlling narratives, not losing them. But what he didn't realize was Jason wasn't playing defense. Not anymore. Jason called a meeting with a woman named Rachel Cole, a former investigative reporter, now living in nearby Eugene. She owed him a favor. Years ago, he'd helped her get out of a tight spot overseas. Now she returned it. Within 48 hours, she compiled a dossier. Business records, public tax filings, land acquisitions, all tied to Darren Turner. Some clean, some suspicious. One, in particular, involving a zoning deal that forced out a local daycare under fire code violations that never existed. Jason sent the file anonymously to the state attorney's office. Meanwhile, Leah received a direct message from one of Jake's former friends, a boy named Tyler. He apologized for staying silent, said he had seen more, had screenshots. Leah asked if he'd be willing to go on record. He hesitated. Jason stepped in, met with Tyler and his mother over coffee. No threats, no pressure, just quiet assurance. "What's going to happen if I speak up?" Tyler asked. Jason leaned in. "You'll stop being part of silence. That's what matters." Tyler nodded. Word of the coming storm reached the school, then City Hall. Darren tried to hold his ground, but his allies were backing away, one by one, because Jason Statham wasn't just fighting for his daughter. He was dismantling a legacy of fear. The final blow didn't come from Jason. It came from the truth. Rachel Cole published her findings in a mid-sized state journal. The headline hit local news by noon. Small-town power broker under scrutiny for real estate corruption, school scandal. The article laid it bare. Financial coercion, intimidation tactics, a clear pattern of abuse stretching back over a decade. Darren Turner's name was front and center. By 3 p.m., the governor's office announced an ethics inquiry into Turner's public dealings. By 4:30, the school board placed the superintendent on leave. By 6 p.m., Jake's name trended nationally, not for movies, but for the girl he struck and the father who didn't flinch. And still, Jason hadn't said a word to the press. He didn't need to. The final school hearing took place under watchful eyes. Lawyers, media, parents who had once stayed silent, now leaning forward. Jake arrived in a suit, but no amount of polish could mask the weight in his eyes. Leah sat across the room, calm, composed. And when asked if she wanted to speak, she did. "I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I'm here because I was taught to stand up when it mattered." Jason watched her from the back. 100 thoughts surged through him, but he said none of them. His daughter didn't need protection anymore. She had become her own shield. The board voted unanimously. Jake was expelled. Criminal charges pending. A formal apology issued to Leah. And when they left the building, no cameras chased them. Just quiet. Jason turned to Leah as they walked to the truck. "You did more than I ever could have done." She looked up at him, a spark in her eyes. "You showed me how." And for the first time in years, Jason Statham smiled. Not because he won, but because she did. In the weeks that followed, Redbridge shifted. Parents began asking questions. Teachers who had once feared speaking up now stepped forward. Darren Turner, facing formal investigation, stepped down from city council and quietly left town. No statement, no parade, just silence. Jake Turner's name disappeared from the local scene. His family sent him away. Leah never spoke his name again. But she wasn't the same girl who'd walked out of school that day. She was stronger, not in the way people think of strength, but in the way that lasts. She returned to class with her chin high and her silence intact. Not out of fear, out of control. Jason's garage saw a sudden wave of customers. Quiet handshakes, longer than usual small talk. People didn't speak about what happened, but they looked at him differently. Not like a stranger, not like a movie star, like a father. One afternoon, Sheriff Owen stopped by. "Funny thing," he said, "whole town seems to have remembered its spine." Jason nodded. Sometimes it takes a little shake. Leah, meanwhile, had started writing privately, an essay then a speech. She was invited to speak at a state education forum on school safety. She declined, for now, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to choose her moment. Jason supported her decision without a word. They kept their routines. Breakfast on Sundays, tea at night, and slowly, life returned to normal. But not the old normal. A better one. Because Jason hadn't just protected his daughter. He'd made sure she never needed protecting again. And in doing so, he gave her something no legacy, no film, no reputation ever could. A name that meant something. Not because it was feared. Because it was respected. This wasn't a story about a slap. It was a story about silence. And what happens when it's broken by the right voice. Jason Statham didn't fight this battle with fists. He didn't storm into rooms or break down doors. He stood where it mattered most, beside his daughter, not in front of her. He taught her not just how to endure, but how to stand. And Leah? She didn't become stronger because of what happened. She revealed the strength she already had. Because real power doesn't come from rage. It comes from restraint, from clarity, from knowing who you are even when the world tells you to sit down. Jake Turner was just one piece of a larger problem. A symptom of what happens when wealth, arrogance, and silence protect cruelty. And Darren Turner, his empire built on compliance, crumbled not from explosion, but from a girl refusing to be ignored. Leah didn't shout. She didn't beg. She simply stood. And in doing so, she reminded an entire town, and maybe you, watching now, that dignity always outlasts power. Jason never asked for thanks. He never gave a press release. But people in Redbridge knew. When trouble comes, it doesn't always show up wearing boots and breaking windows. Sometimes it walks in, drinks its tea, and never raises its voice. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and tell us, if someone hurt your daughter, your sister, your friend, what would you do? Because in a world built on noise, sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one who stays quiet.